Hi, I'm Charlie. Welcome to Overtime Arcade. This is my first ever attempt at welding. Now that I'm done welding, it's time to hit it with my angle grinder.
Overtime!
All right, and here's our finished product, or at least this is the end result of all of the welding and grinding. And yeah, I know, it's looking kind of rough, but don't worry, a little bit of Bondo and our new control panel overlay, and this thing is gonna look like $1 million. You know, and I'm sorry I didn't really film every single step of the process. I usually like to do that, and I know people appreciate that, but for this was definitely something where I was making it up as I was going along, or maybe I should say I was figuring it out as I was going along. You know, because I have never, let me reiterate this, I have never welded in my entire life. I never did it in shop class growing up, never done in any capacity whatsoever. So this was really a learning process for me. So take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I know there are professional welders. Welding is obviously a profession and occupation unto itself. People spend their entire careers perfecting the art. And this is my roughshod, first attempt at doing it. And basically, what I was trying to do was, fill in the holes in a Swiss cheese control panel. This is a very common thing that happens with converted arcade cabinets, whether it's a metal control panel like this or a wooden control panel. When operators convert one game to another, they often drilled into the original control panel to add holes for additional joysticks, new buttons, whatever. And if you're converting it back to the original game, you've got to fill those holes. On a wooden control panel, you know, it's a lot easier with dowels and wood glue and some sanding. With metal control panels, it's a bunch more work. In the past, I've done this like with my Pango with JB Weld, which is very easy and it comes out okay, but maybe not as professional, not as strong as welding. So I really wanted to try that, try welding for the first time with this project. You know, and that's one thing that I really enjoy about this hobby is it's an opportunity to learn new skills, try things out that can, you know, transfer to other things in life. And I don't know if I'll ever be in a position where I have to weld something, you know, with my car or house or whatever, but now I, you know, at least have some familiarity with welding. So let me walk you through what I was doing. Again, this control panel had been all cut up. Let me show a picture of it right here, what we were looking at originally. So as you can see, they drilled a bunch of additional holes for new action buttons, some smaller holes for start buttons, a bunch of, you know, screw holes to hold on some you know, plexi that was covering up the control panel overlay. And so in total, I had to fill 17 holes that had been added to this control panel. And, you know, over here, I've got another one. This is the control panel from my other Q*bert cabinet. This is actually the one that's going to be mine. It's a little bit in worse shape. There's larger holes that I need to fill. And this is the one for Mark's cabinet for Back to the Media Arcade, opening soon in Winchester, Virginia. But yeah, so just to walk you sort of through the process here, essentially what I did was for the 6 larger you know, action button holes that were added, I cut with a hole saw in a sheet of 16 gauge steel, because that's what this is. This control panel is made out of 16 gauge steel. I cut plugs, you know, circle plugs of the exact right size to fill it. For the additional sort of small action, or I guess start buttons or whatever that were added up here, I got some smaller pieces of a plug to fill, and then, you know, the smaller ones just had to be filled just with weld material. And so yeah, I lined them all up, dropped them all in, and I welded 3 tack welds on each side. So 3 on top, 3 on the underside, sort of offset to kind of hold it in place. And then, you know, did the same thing for the action, or the start buttons up here. And yeah, then had to, you know, grind it all down, fill in the holes, grind it all down with my angle grinder. And then the other thing that was a real challenge is, you know, Q*bert has that weird joystick, and the way that it's mounted to the control panel, and you know, quite a few games are like this. There are these threaded studs on the underside of the control panel that the joystick sort of mounts onto. So it's a nice clean look from the top side, you know, no carriage bolts or anything. And unfortunately, these studs had been removed by the operator that did the conversion. They just sort of, you know, took an angle grinder and took them off. So I had to mount new studs on the underside of the control panel, which was, yeah, a ton of work. And again, especially on the underside, this looks ugly, but it's nice and secure. All of these plugs are nice and solid. The studs are nice and solid, and I dry fit the new joystick, and it barely fits. You know, a little bit of, you know, needs a little bit of encouragement to fit over, but maybe we can widen the holes in the plastic mounting holes. But yeah, so that's basically what we're working with. And just to kind of walk you through the tools that I used, here's basically what I had at my disposal. First and foremost is the actual welding, the welder, and almost all of this came from Harbor Freight. And before you get any ideas, I did not buy the cheapest stuff that Harbor Freight had. Most of this is the second cheapest stuff that Harbor Freight has. Starting with the welder, this is the titanium Flux 125. Now this is a flux core welder. There's lots of different types of welding processes. There's MIG and TIG and stick and all kinds of other stuff. And flux core welding is one type of welding. It's probably the simplest, it's the easiest to get into. It doesn't necessarily provide the best results, and there's a lot of things that it can't weld. But flux core welding is a pretty beginner-friendly thing to jump into. One of the things with flux core welding is you don't need gas, right? So a lot of different types of welding require a gas bottle that basically the gas is insulating the puddle while you're welding. I don't really understand it, but with flux core welding, you don't need that. Essentially, there is a spool of wire, not too dissimilar from solder, that has flux inside of it. Again, I don't really understand the chemistry or whatever. You load this thing with a spool of wire of the correct wire. I used 0.030 wire, flux core wire for this. The wire feeds through the mechanism, goes through this line and into the welding gun, right? And essentially you clamp down, this is your ground, you clamp that down onto your piece that you're welding and pull the trigger, you know, point the business end of this thing at the material you're trying to weld, and that's basically all there is to it. Now, seriously though, you know, if you're gonna get into this, which, you know, I recommend, you know, trying this stuff out, make sure this is not the only video that you're watching about this. Make sure you watch, like I did, watch a bunch of YouTube videos about how to do this sort of thing, how to get into it, you know, read the instructions thoroughly. But this is really, I wanted to show you my setup and show me doing it, so you know, maybe think about doing it for yourself. Again, on the inside of this welder, there is sort of a quick start guide depending on the gauge of material that you're working with. You know, you need to set your wire speed, so how fast the wire is being fed out of the tip of the gun. There's, you know, I don't know, is it voltage or amperage? Yeah, it's the voltage that you need to set. You know, because different materials and different thicknesses, you know, require sort of different settings. So read all the instructions, but honestly, this is really, really simple. Another reason that I picked this, you know, and this is like 150, 160 bucks, something like that. Sometimes it's cheaper when it's on sale at Harbor Freight. Again, it's the second cheapest welder that they have. Is you can plug this right into a household, you know, power outlet. You don't need a, you know, 220, you don't need anything sort of, you know, super crazy. You can plug this into an outlet. You really do want to use a 20 amp circuit that is on a GFCI breaker. And ideally, you know, you don't want anything else on it. Now, fortunately, I have my outlets on the outside of my house and in the garage are on a 20 amp GFCI circuit. But I've got a freezer and a refrigerator out here in the garage, so I unplugged those while I was running the welder, because this thing does draw, you know, quite a bit of current. So yeah, very happy with this, you know, very economical, practical, easy sort of setup. And again, this is not even close, not even in the ballpark, not even in the same conversation as a professional welding setup. But, you know, for 150 bucks or so, I'm pretty happy with the results I got. Now, anytime you're welding, obviously you need to think about, you know, protective equipment, PPE, whatever, starting with your helmet. So I got an auto darkening helmet, which, you know, there's sensors here and it's battery powered and also has, you know, solar to charge it. You know, basically, this is looking for the arc when you start welding, and it's pretty instantaneous. It's going to automatically darken the lens that you're looking through, and then, you know, when you stop welding, it goes back to normal, and you can sort of see what you're doing and line everything up for your next weld, that sort of thing. So this is the again from Harbor Freight, the titanium 7 square inch auto darkening welding helmet. Yeah, really happy with this. It's got a grinder setting. It's very easy to you know, change the settings and work just fine. I also got a set of leather welding gloves and even some welding sleeves, you know, because the spatter can kind of get everywhere. It can get on your shirt, you know, get on your arms. And so having these sort of leather, and this is all cheap stuff, leather sleeves to protect your forearms, sort of a good thing there. And, you know, once you're done welding and everything is cooled down, there's going to be a bunch of excess material, and you need to grind that smooth. And for that, you need an angle grinder. So again, this is the second cheapest angle grinder I think that Harbor Freight had. This is by Bauer, 4.5 inch angle grinder with a trigger switch, which I liked nicer in the store than some of the other options. There's a bunch of different switch options. This has a flap disc on it, flap wheel disc from Warrior. I think I got a multi-pack of a bunch of different options. This is the 120 grit flap disc, and this worked really, really well to grind it down. You still want to wear your welding helmet, put it to the grinding setting. You still want to wear your gloves and all that because this will throw off a ton of sparks, and you don't want to get that anywhere onto yourself or onto a flammable material. So be very careful when you're doing that. And essentially that's like, you know, sanding down all the rough stuff, you know, to get it relatively smooth. You know, it's not going to give you the sort of, you know, finish, the final finish, but it's going to knock all that stuff down nice and smooth, and also help expose if you have bad welds. And some of the welds aren't perfect, right? That's why I have, you know, essentially 6 tack welds per plug here. because not all of them are going to be perfect. Some of them are going to have cracks that go through them. And the angle grinder will help expose if those welds are not that good. If you didn't get good penetration and the material really didn't get bonded. But yeah, so it's basically what I was working with. So a couple of tips, obviously you want to practice a bunch. And this, this right here is what I was practicing on. So this is the piece of 16 gauge sheet metal steel that I bought, and you can sort of see where I was cutting the plugs with my hole saw. And these are the hole saw blades that I bought, relatively cheap set of carbide from Amazon that I got, a bunch of different sizes, so I could experiment with, which were going to give me the right size to fill the holes, because these are like, I forget, 1.25" or 1.125" buttonholes, but that's the size of the hole. And if you look at the saw blade here, the hole saw blade, there's quite a bit of kerf, so you need to drill, practice and try experiment a little bit until you sort of see what the plug size is that these are producing, and use that to fit the hole. And you might need to do a little bit of filing with a hand file to get it really perfect. But yeah, those are the hole saw bits that I used on my power drill. And yeah, so cut off a bunch of the plugs here, and this is the result of me practicing. And literally I practiced for 2 days after work. Just came out here, ran a bunch of beads just to sort of get a hang of what I was doing. I also drilled a bunch of holes, and these are the ones that I didn't end up filling. But I drilled a ton of holes and practiced filling holes. I even practiced filling, using plugs to fill larger holes. I practiced, mounting a stud and then, grinding it down nice and flat. So yeah, very, very happy with that. So you definitely want to do a lot of practice and really get the hang of it, get your settings dialed in, and for exactly what you're working with. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And a couple things that I learned. Let's see. One, you want to hold that puddle, hold that tack weld on for a little bit and really let the puddle kind of penetrate and really bond the material. Otherwise, it'll just sit up on top, and when you go and grind it off, there really isn't a weld left behind. You've sort of removed all of it. You really need it to penetrate into the material. Don't leave it on too long though, or it will melt all the way through, and you basically have added another hole that you need to fill. Especially filling the little screw holes. If you just try to fill it, the material wants to fall through. It's hard to really kind of build up on the sides to get it to cross the chasm, as it were. And one thing that I saw people recommending is getting a copper backing, a sheet of copper, and putting that on behind underneath the hole that you're trying to fill. Because the weld is not going to bond to the copper. But I don't know if you've been tracking the price of copper lately. Copper ain't cheap, and I didn't want to buy a big old sheet of copper just to sort of use it as a backer. So what I did was I bought a couple of these. This is like a 2-inch sort of section of copper pipe, in the plumbing section at Ace Hardware, designed for whatever, making couplings or stuff. And I hammered it flat. And this is what I was left with, sort of a 2-inch square piece of copper. And I was able to use that, sort of here behind and moving it around and using it as a backer. And that worked out pretty well. That made it a lot easier to fill the individual holes, the small screw holes that didn't have plugs that I was filling in. Let's see what other sort of things worked out for me. A big thing that you have to watch out for is, both when you're welding and when you're grinding with the angle grinder, you're putting a lot of heat on this control panel. And 16 gauge steel is not particularly thick, and you can really risk warping and twisting the metal by applying heat like that, because you're not applying it uniformly across the entire piece. You're sort of working section by section. And if you can sort of see my practice sheet right here, like this is warped pretty good. And obviously this is easier to bend because it's just one flat piece of metal and doesn't have the sort of contours and bends in it like the control panel does. So that's something you have to watch out for. So 2 things that I did to really help minimize the warping and twisting. One thing was I screwed the sheet metal down on a board while I was working on it. So fortunately there are some screw holes here, carriage bolt holes on either side that are meant to be there that didn't need to be filled. And so I was able to, working on a piece of wood underneath, I got really kind of, torched and scorched. I was able to screw the control panel down. That really kind of helped hold it in place, screwing it down onto the wood helped prevent it from trying to twist. Not perfect, but a little bit, sort of precaution there to help prevent it. The other thing, and I got this from Troy, from Troy's Restorations, I had my air hose with me the whole time. You probably saw that in the video. And every time I would put 1 or 2 tack welds down, I would grab my air hose and blast it with air, just really trying to cool it off. So imagine like you got really hot food and you're blowing on it before you take a bite. Basically, that's what I was doing with the air hose, blowing onto the weld. Now, I think in some cases that might have led to the weld cracking, but we were able to resolve that. And but yeah, blasting it with the air hose really helped to cool it down. Also, while grinding, it in between holes that I was grinding down or welds that I was grinding down, hitting it with that air hose really helped minimize the heat and minimize twisting. Now, even with that, there was a little bit, so I did have to, sort of take this, take my hammer to it and really kind of, get it nice and flat again, hitting it against, a piece of wood on the floor of my garage. But I think we're relatively good. There's maybe a slight sort of bend in it, but really not bad. Once we get this sort of all bondoed and with a control panel overlay and then latched into a cabinet and really, the latch down, you'll never notice it. It's going to look perfect. So yeah, I mean, what else did I do? So for the threaded studs, and this was something that I was kind of, really dreading. I was talking to Troy a bunch on how to do this. A while back, I had bought these. These are threaded studs, designed for a welder. There's even a specialized stud welder where you kind of stick this into the welding gun, slam it down, hold the welder down against the metal, and it welds it from the top side and sort of welds it right on from underneath. I didn't want to buy that. Those aren't cheap, especially one that's able to hold a larger gauge threaded stud like this, as opposed to smaller ones designed for popping out dents in auto body panels. So essentially what I did, following Troy's advice, I took a bunch of these and I cut off the tops here, the bases, right? So I just had sort of a threaded bar here. And this is just plain steel. That's another thing. People might be wondering, why didn't I just use washers, pre-made washers you can buy from the hardware store and weld those in? Because those washers are either stainless steel, and this welder, flux core welder, is not going to be able to do stainless steel, or they're zinc plated, and you do not want to weld zinc. When you weld zinc, it throws off really toxic fumes that are very, very dangerous. So do not weld zinc. Do not attempt welding zinc plated washers. So that's why I got regular steel. And you can see some flash rust sort of appearing there. Regular steel, mild steel, not stainless, not galvanized, not zinc plated. Yeah, just steel. And that's what these are right here. These are just plain steel. These are designed to be welded. So I cut the bases off and drilled holes into the control panel. You can see I was practicing over here, trying to get the size exactly right, and basically just jammed the threaded stud with the base cut off and had just a little bit poking out on the top side, welded that down, and then took the angle grinder to it to get it nice and smooth. And yeah, I think it turned out okay. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to go over. So at this point, what I need to do, what I'm going to do basically is I need to figure out the top here. We're going to Bondo this with some regular Bondo, get it nice and smooth and sanded down, get that looking perfect on the top and ready for a little bit of paint and the new control panel overlay. And then on the underside, I'm actually going to use some JB Weld again, just to kind of reinforce things. I'm going to skim it with JB Weld on the underside, just so we have a little bit of reinforcement. I'm going to do the Bondo first, because the Bondo will dry in like 20 or 30 minutes, versus JB Weld really takes like 24 hours to really firmly set. So yeah, let me get set up for that. We'll do the Bondo, we'll do the JB Weld. We'll get all that sanded down. We'll move on to a little bit of painting. We'll put white on top to really, make the CPO pop. We'll put black on the underside just to sort of cover up all the bare steel. And yeah, at that point, we'll be ready to put on the control panel overlay. So let's get set up for all of that. Okay, you've seen me do Bondo a bunch of times. And here is the regular Bondo that we're going to be using. But you know, I'll just show you the process here because I skipped, I skipped or at least sped through a bunch of the welding and grinding that I did. Oh, the smell of Bondo. It's not great, but makes me think of making progress on projects. So we'll get a healthy amount of Bondo here. I'll mix it up just a little bit because it separates sometimes in the can when left alone for a while. But we'll get a good healthy dollop of this into a little mixing bowl. Is that going to be enough? Yeah, probably. And I always get told I'm working, I do too much at a time. And let's do this. Scrape it off with scraper. Sorry if this is boring and you've seen this before, but people tell me they like to see all the steps, the whole process. And you got to give the people what they want. And some cream hardener. Mix it up a little bit in there. Squeeze out a good amount. Maybe a little bit more. So we did put a ton of Bondo in here. Mix that up real quick. And I still am not used to blue Bondo. You know, in my mind, Bondo was always supposed to be pink. Even when you saw, you know, cars, like especially in high school, people's beater cars that were all fixed with Bondo and hadn't been painted. It was always that sort of pinkish gray. That's what Bondo is supposed to look like. Okay. I forget, a commenter also told me, you know, leaving the Bondo sort of spread out in the plate or the bowl will help prevent it from, you know, really activating on its own. So let's get a good amount right here and just start smoothing it on. We got to fill in a bunch of, you know, cracks and small holes. They also tell me that I work the Bondo too much, to just slather it on and let the sanding do the rest. So I'm going to try to take that advice here as much as I can. I'm always reminded of a buddy of mine when we worked in a restaurant together, and he would, you know, who's a cook in the back, you know, making people's breakfast sandwiches, and he would spend so much time with the you know, putting cream cheese on bagels and like making it all perfectly smooth, and everyone's like, just slap it on, you know, cake it on, and let the customer figure out exactly how much or how little they want on their bagel. So we'll get this all on here. And we can always add more. Very easy to add more, especially if it's, you know, once we get it all sanded and it's not perfect. We can always come back with another application, but I want to get as much as possible. Get this on here. And again, you know, I'm filling a bunch of, you know, cracks because you hold this up to the light, even the welding that I did, and you'll notice, you know, plenty of light shining through. I'm gonna have to put another application on. Plenty of light shining through, and that's because I was using tack welds. I did not, you know, run a bead around each plug, and that's important, right? 16 gauge steel, this is thin. Running a bead around the entire you know, perimeter of the plug, while that would certainly add a ton more strength to the weld, that's a ton more heat. This thing really can't take that much heat. So if you run beads, you're just going to crack it, or not crack it, you're going to warp and twist the heck out of the control panel. So you got to use tack welds to hold it in place. So, and that's another thing I got from Troy. So I'm going to let this set up a little bit, let it dry. I'll put another sort of layer of Bondo on, let that dry perfectly for like 30 minutes, and then I'll sand it, you know, all nice and smooth. And I'll come back and we'll do the JV weld on the underside. So stay tuned. All right, after a couple coats of Bondo and sanding, couple applications, I think we're in reasonably good shape on the top. I'm happy with this. It's nice and smooth. And yeah, I know, it looks like there's a ton of Bondo on this. It is a very thin coat, you know, and that's kind of the point, right? We want to fill in all of the cracks and gaps and imperfections and divots and have really a nice smooth surface. And I know how it looks. Trust the process. This is going to look great at the end. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And we can flip it over and turn our attention to the back side. So basically what I want to do here is take some JB Weld and again cover up. I don't have to completely, you know, frost the thing, but I really want to put some you know, JB Weld to back all of the sort of holes that I filled, all of the plugs that I put in. I kind of want to avoid the studs just because I don't want to interfere with the joystick's ability to be mounted on the underside. But all of these sort of things back here, like this is not super grounded down, but you know, again, just to reinforce it and make sure it's nice and strong, I'm going to do that with JB Weld. Now, I couldn't find my my other JB Weld. I don't know if maybe I used it all last time. So we've got a new package here, extra large size. And you know, this is kind of similar to Bondo. You've seen me do this before. You know, this is, you know, basically super strong, and it's like, what does it say? Steel reinforced epoxy, right? So kind of like Bondo, you can work it like Bondo. A couple key differences: you want to do equal parts of the epoxy and the hardener, rather than a, you know, golf ball size to pea size ratio with Bondo with that mixture. The other thing is you have more time to work it because it takes about I think 4 to 6 hours to set. You know, like it says right here, 4 to 6 hours to set. But then it takes, you know, 15 to 24 hours to cure. So, you know, I can sort of take my time here and get it nice and smooth on, but I'm gonna have to leave it for 24 hours to let it fully cure. And so it's Thursday night right now, so 24 hours from now will be Friday night. That's when I can kind of like sand it down a little bit as needed. And then I wanna paint this thing. I'm gonna do black on the underside and white on top. And then, you know, the white on top before I put the control panel overlay on, I really want to let that paint, you know, really cure for 48 hours before putting artwork on it, just so that I don't deal with any sort of, you know, separation or adhesion issues. And what that means is the CPO is not going to be put on in this video because I need to get this video out by Saturday at the latest for, you know, channel members exclusive early access viewing, and then for the public release on Sunday. So CPO is not going to come until the next episode, I'm afraid. So let's go ahead and mix our JB Weld. I'll start with the steel, and we'll open it up like this, and I'll use the top to puncture it. There we go. What is on my hand already? I'm not sure. Interesting. Maybe there was some moisture inside the package, but we'll squeeze on a decent amount here. Okay, let's see. Oh, this, is it coming, is it oozing out? I don't know. Bizarre. All right, that's probably more than enough. It just wants to keep coming. Okay. All right. Is this thing leaking? Is that what I'm feeling? Let me put a fresh set of gloves on. Yeah, that was weird. It was like there's some kind of oil on that tube. Strange. All right, let's puncture this side. There we go. And we'll squeeze in our equal part. All right. Do our best kind of keeping an equal mixture. And I think I'm making way too much, but we'll be all right. There we go. Kind of using half of each tube here. All right, the hardener kind of stinks. Put that cap on. Okay. And we will mix the two parts together real quick. Okay, I think I've got it adequately mixed now. It does take a kind of a while to do that. So we'll get a good dollop on. Stuff likes to stick together. And let's go and spread it on. Again, trying to avoid the studs so that I don't interfere with the operation of mounting the joystick. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. A nice layer of frosting. I'm gonna let this cure for 24 hours. I might give it a light sanding, but I've got it nice and smooth. Again, you can work this stuff pretty well. It's not like Bondo where you really just have to slap it on and deal with smoothing it out with sanding. I was able to smooth this on fairly well. I mean, you can see plenty of sort of wrinkles and stuff, but none of that's going to be visible. I'll give it a light sanding and then we'll be painting it. And so I think the last thing we'll do in this episode is paint this control panel, because again, I want to let it cure, let the JB Weld cure for a full 24 hours, let the paint cure for 48 before we put on a CPO. So yeah, stay tuned for the last part of this episode. All right, it's actually been about 36 hours since I put on this JB Weld, and it's still really kind of tacky to the touch, and I can't remember if that's normal or what, but I don't want to rush this, so I've decided I'm going to let this cure a little bit longer before sanding and painting and letting that paint cure before I put on the reproduction control panel overlay for the bert on this control panel. I don't want to rush it, especially because, there's not enough time to get all that done in this video. So I think we're going to wrap up this video here because there are a couple things that I am trying to rush, or there is a couple things that I am trying to rush. First, I need to get this video out for early access viewing exclusively by channel members. It's one of the perks of being an Overtime Arcade channel member. Check the join link down below to learn more about that, all the perks that you get. So I need to get this video out today for them so it can be released to the public tomorrow. The other thing that I need to do is I need to hurry up and make some space in my garage, and that's going to be a bit of an issue because I got a lot of stuff back here, including stuff that I have not unveiled yet to all of you. But by the time you're watching this, I will be hopefully, fingers crossed, on my way back from a warehouse raid. That's right. A couple of guys and I are going on allegedly an arcade warehouse raid on Sunday. So yeah, if you're not a channel member, the earliest you can be watching this is Sunday afternoon, and hopefully by then I'll be on my way back from this incredible, hopefully, fingers crossed, warehouse raid. So I need to move some things around to make it easier to unload the truck. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me get this video out, finish editing, release to channel members, and then to the public on Sunday, and then make some room in this garage. So hopefully that arcade warehouse raid comes through. So anyway, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for all your support. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. All of that stuff is super important to help spread the word about this channel, to grow the channel. Let me know, what you think about my welding skills, right? Have you done this before? Do you have any tips on how I can improve my craft here that I'm trying to hone? Or does this give you inspiration to maybe try doing it for yourself? Grabbing some relatively cheap welding equipment from Harbor Freight and giving a crack at fixing a control panel that might look like that with a bunch of extra holes. Anyway, let's wrap it up here. As always, thanks for watching Overtime Arcade. I'm Charlie, and I'll see you next time.
Overtime!